What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas, your host, bringing you another edition of the Thomas Take. And this Saturday, in case you guys don't know, July 29th, 10 in the East, 7 in the West, UFC 214 kicks off. 3 title fights. You have Jon Jones on the comeback trail versus the light heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. You have the welterweight title on the line as Tyron Woodley takes on the longtime UFC submission artist Damian Maia. And you have also the vacant women's featherweight title, the 145-pound women's belt on the line. Cyborg Santos versus Tanya Evinger in an Invicta women's super fights of sorts, and I'm very excited for the 3 title fights especially. You also have a barn burner with Robbie Lawler and Donald Cerrone, a true slobber knocker to say the least. I'm very excited for that one as well, but I wanted to dedicate part 1 of today's show to the main event of the evening, Daniel Cormier, the UFC light heavyweight champion, I should say, versus the former UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones, and the keys to victory for both fighters. If you check out the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube page, you would see that I actually already posted my prediction and my preview for the bout. This edition, though, of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast just states how Daniel Cormier can win this fight and how Jon Jones can win this fight. So let's get started. Daniel Cormier, the UFC light heavyweight champion, won the belt in the wake of Jon Jones, and the troubles that he has had outside the cage. Daniel Cormier, a guy that has really accomplished everything in terms of being an amateur wrestler, being an Olympian, and now the UFC champion. He was also a Strikeforce Grand Prix champion as well. So he has done virtually everything that he has needed to do as an MMA fighter, accomplished pretty much everything that you can as an MMA fighter, but he has one loss on his pro MMA record, and that was at UFC 182 versus the then UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones. So this time around, after the rematch was more than 2 years in the making, what does Daniel Cormier have to do in order to win this fight? A topic that I don't think is being talked about enough, being that, spoiler alert, I am picking Jon Jones to win this fight. What does Daniel Cormier, though, have to do to win this fight? Let's start off with the obvious. The only way, in my eyes, the only way that Daniel Cormier can really win this fight, and let's give Daniel Cormier some credit, the original fight, the first fight, did go a full 5 rounds. Jon Jones did not finish Daniel Cormier, so that is something to Daniel Cormier's credit that you can kind of notch in the W column in some ways for Daniel Cormier. He did go the distance with Jon Jones, the 5-minute rounds, but Daniel Cormier has to win rounds in this fight in order to get the decision in my eyes, because Jon Jones is the type of fighter that is obviously winning. He can win it via unanimous decision. He can win it via TKO. He can win it via submission. He's a multifaceted mixed martial artist, and that's why he's one of the best MMA fighters of all time, if not the best. Daniel Cormier has to be able to take Jon Jones down to the mat and keep him on his back. Lay and pray, so to speak. Get Jones down, land ground strikes, land heavy punches on top, something that he has been able to do in his previous fights with Alexander Gustafsson and Anderson Silva and Rumble, both fights at UFC 210 and I believe UFC 187, I believe it was. So, could be wrong there, but in both fights with Rumble, he was able to successfully avoid the takedown and take down Rumble. He was able to take down Gustafsson as well. Didn't really keep Gustafsson down for long, but in order for DC to have any snowball's chance in hell of winning this fight, I believe, going into this fight, it has to be via wrestling. He has to use that wrestling pedigree. And believe it or not, in the first bout, Jon Jones was the one that was successfully able to take Daniel Cormier down. And Jon Jones came from a junior collegiate wrestling background, which is a few notches below Olympian, obviously. So Daniel Cormier has to be able to take Jon Jones down. I do believe that Daniel Cormier's striking has improved. Especially one fight that really sticks out to me was his fight versus Alexander Gustafsson, where Gustafsson, the longer, rangier puncher, much like Jones will be in this fight, DC was really able to weather the storm, whether it be head kicks or body kicks. Cormier was inside Gustafsson's range. He was willing to go toe-to-toe with him. Will he be able to do the same with Jon Jones? Will he parlay that strategy, that game plan, into this fight with Jon Jones? I think that right there is a huge key to victory. If Daniel Cormier can strike in short distance like he did versus Gustafsson versus Jon Jones, I believe that will be huge. In this fight versus Jon Jones at UFC 214, if we see the Daniel Cormier that fought Alexander Gustafsson, this fight could be interesting. But Jon Jones offers different looks, different angles, and that is my segue. What does Jon Jones have to do to win this fight? And it is not more the same. Go back to what I said just moments ago. Jon Jones did not finish Daniel Cormier in the first fight. He went the full 5 rounds with Daniel Cormier. So he has to do something in this fight differently. Although he did win, he has to finish Daniel Cormier. I think that is first and foremost, that's the goal for every fighter. Do whatever you can to spend the least amount of time in there. Don't spend the most amount of time, spend the least amount of time in there. There could be a situation where if the fight were to go to a unanimous decision, if Jones doesn't finish Daniel Cormier, the judges have previously thought in their minds in previous fights that, hey, he didn't finish the champ. You got to finish the champ to be the champ. And this time, the judges could give the fight to Daniel Cormier. That could very well happen because he comes into this fight with the champion tag to his name, unlike the first fight. So, in my eyes, I think number one, Jon Jones has to finish Daniel Cormier. How does he do that? He makes Daniel Cormier, lunge in at him via, distance. Jon Jones is very, very good at managing his distance. But there's one dynamic of this fight, one dynamic of Jon Jones' striking pedigree. Jon Jones was very, it was very common, I should say, in Jon Jones' striking game to have his palms open. He would always extend the hand, always reach his fingers out, always kind of just keep his palms open. He was very loose, very light on his feet, and that is what most fighters in MMA do react that way. And I think that is something that Jon Jones, I know that is something that Jon Jones won't be able to do, being that is outlawed in MMA now. That meaning the extended hands, the open palms, to avoid eye pokes. And most of the time, when that happens, a point is deducted from a fighter. And if a point is deducted again, it could lead to a disqualification loss. MMA rules have changed, so Jon Jones does have to adapt the way he holds his hands, the way he usually would hold his hands in his fights, and that is something that Jones definitely needs to work on. I believe the leg kicks of Jon Jones, being that Daniel Cormier is a stocky guy, he has to carry around a little bit more weight. It seems, he's more top-heavy than Jon Jones in terms of, I don't want to say fat, but he's just a stocky guy. You could say fat. He is a chunkier guy than Jon Jones. Jones is the definitely more athletic-toned athlete out of the two. But if Jon Jones can land leg kicks, I think that will be big for him. The leg kicks usually set up the head kicks and the body kicks. Keeping Daniel Cormier at a distance, keeping him at a range where he can land those body kicks will then wear down Daniel Cormier. And that is the game plan that I see Jon Jones implementing in this fight for sure. So the keys to victory for Daniel Cormier, wrestle, wrestle, wrestle. Something that he has been working on very much so at AKA. He has to be able to take Jon Jones down, wear him out, being that this is Jon Jones' second fight in 2 years, essentially. So he's only fought once in the last 2 years. So this is a huge fight for Jon Jones. This is a huge fight for Daniel Cormier. People keep asking me whether or not, who's next? Who's next after this fight? Regardless of the result, whether it is, unless it's a draw, the only opponent that makes sense if Jon Jones were to win would be Alexander Gustafsson. He'd be taking 2 fights from Daniel Cormier. There would be no trilogy. Daniel Cormier would probably ride off into the sunset. And John Jones would then fight Alexander Gustafsson in an epic rematch. If you watch their first fight was incredible. One of the best fights of all time. Daniel Cormier, on the other hand, if he's able to beat John Jones, then that sets up a trilogy match. You're tied 1-1, and that would be the fight that's next. You get another fight with John Jones, which would be a huge moneymaker for the UFC. So to Scott Brown, who asked that question, what is next for the winner of this fight? It depends on who wins. Daniel Cormier, if he wins, it's a definite immediate rematch for John Jones, I think, because I think his only real way to win it is via decision for Daniel Cormier. And then I don't see Daniel Cormier finishing John Jones. I really don't. And if he does and I'm wrong, then that's fine. But going into this fight, this is a part of it. I put my opinion out there. I say how I think things are going to shake out, and that's that. If John Jones can win this fight via knockout, then there's no doubt in my mind that he fights Alexander Gustafsson next in one of the greatest rematches of all time, as this fight is one of the greatest rematches of all time as well. So this, realistically, is a fight at this current time that features the 2 best UFC light heavyweights ever. And that is not a knock on the Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture era. Guys like that paved the way for this sport to be where it is today. They're the definite Mount Rushmore guys. And my Mount Rushmore of MMA, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, Matt Hughes, Hoist Gracie, those type of guys. Those are my pioneers of this sport. But to say the least, I think essentially these are the 2 best UFC light heavyweights of all time. And barring, whatever bad beef or bad blood that these guys have between each other, this is going to be an epic fight. And I'm very excited for it on July 29th, this Saturday, live on pay-per-view, Anaheim, California, the Honda Center. I wanted to bookend this part 1 of today's show, Keys to Victory for Cormier and Jones, on that note, stating that this fight is in Anaheim. Why is it in Anaheim? Why is it not in Las Vegas? That's a question that has been asked of me to answer live on the Thomas Take, and I gotta say why. This fight is in Anaheim because the California State Athletic Commission implemented new weigh-in rules to where Daniel Cormier and John Jones have technically already weighed in for this fight through the California State Athletic Commission. So that is that. Daniel Cormier, it's well known that he's had very big struggles throughout his career, dating back to his Olympic wrestling days with weight and with cutting weight specifically, and they needed to make that happen. Cormier's pushing 40. They needed this fight to happen. The UFC needed this fight to happen. So putting it in California actually benefited the UFC and really enabled this fight to happen. So that was my take on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Keys to Victory, Daniel Cormier versus John Jones. Tune in Saturday, July 29th. I cannot wait for this fight. I'll be right back.